Hello, everyone. I am Carla Jakubovic, hostess of the Swiss Learning Podcast, and thanks for listening. Swiss Learning represents 13 prestigious schools in Switzerland, and they're experts at finding the right fit for each student. On this podcast, we will showcase alumni from each one of these schools to share their success stories and insights with you. Today, we're welcoming Tatiana Sharpe, an alumna from Collège Alpin Beau Soleil in Villars. Tatiana, welcome. I'm so happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's a joy, and I'm honored to be able to speak to you today.
That's wonderful. Tatiana, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Definitely. So my name is Tatiana Sharpe. I am 24 years old. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe before moving over to Beau Soleil for high school. I'm a bit of an interesting mix. I'm half Zimbabwean, half Ukrainian, so you don't get a lot of us around in the world. And I'm an entrepreneur.
That's awesome. Tatiana, every year, so many incredible students graduate from our schools. So choosing just one to be interviewed can be a tricky process. And how your name came about was that you weren't a student who immediately fell in love with the school and with boarding life. Yours was a story about resilience. How did you end up at a boarding school in Switzerland? Tell us about your experience.
Sure. So this is a very personal experience. As I mentioned, I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. And, I went to a traditional, obviously Zimbabwe was a British colony before it got its independence. So I went to a traditional British type curricula, all girls school. It was a day school. And I was a professional ballroom dancer at that time. So in 2010, I had participated in the World Championships in Blackpool. And, my routine was sleep, breakfast, school, and then train 7 hours every single day.
Wow.
And unfortunately, before I moved to Beau Soleil, my dancing partner at that time died in a car accident. And it was a very difficult time for me because obviously experiencing loss at such a young age, really shapes you into an entirely different person. And of course, having that kind of strict routine and pressure when it came to dancing, that was my whole life. And my cousin, my mom's twin sister's daughter, was living in Switzerland. And so my parents really encouraged me to go and experience a summer school in Switzerland before I decided to move over there. Mm-hmm. And it was always a part of the plan. My father had always said to me, I want to give you more than what my father has given me. And so, it was always a part of the plan. Switzerland, we didn't know which school exactly. I actually went to Le Rosé for the summer camp. But I just completely fell in love with the country and the people and the way things worked and the fact that there were so many different cultures and nationalities. And when I was in Switzerland and I came across Beau Soleil, I felt like that was the place that I was meant to be. And it was very difficult at first because I had obviously traveled a lot when I was young, but I'd never lived away from family. And it was difficult for me because I was so used to putting all of my time and energy into dancing that I started, realizing, wow, this is totally different. I don't have my family around me. And just, I would say I'm quite a free-spirited person. So the routine and the strictness, the ability to take responsibility for yourself and, fall into place with this entire new culture was very difficult at first. But Beau Soleil became like a second family to me. And it definitely helped me overcome all the difficulties that I'd faced at a young age. And it taught me the ability to be resilient, to kind of pick up and move forward. And the school's motto is it's what you do that counts. And so I had reinvested all of the time and energy that I spent on dancing into my education, which I never had, big ambitions or plans for. So that's a little bit of my story of joining Beau Soleil.
What were your favorite activities on campus?
On campus, for me, something that was really cool and unique, obviously coming from Southern Africa, was that skiing was a part of our curriculum. So every Tuesdays, there was like no class. It was ski class. So halfway during the day, we'd go up onto the mountains. We'd separate into our groups with ski instructors, and it was a part of our curriculum. So yeah, I
That
really
is
love
pretty exciting to have that on the curriculum, right? Not many schools are able to offer that. That's great. What was your favorite subject or teacher at Beau Soleil? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll never forget. There's two teachers in particular. So my English literature teacher, Alan, and my history teacher, Miss Dawn. The, Alan, so my English literature teacher, is probably the most authentic person I have ever met in my life. And he made the class so interesting that, I mean, you know, we had our laptops and phones, which was also totally different. You know, in a African school, we didn't have those opportunities.
Sure.
And so being in a class where you have the opportunity to go onto Facebook or, you know, scroll on your timeline and be so absorbed and taken away by what someone is teaching you speaks a lot. So I think just the value and the high quality level of teaching was incredible. And then Miss Dawn in history was my absolute favorite subject. She really fostered, I think if it wasn't for her, there's a high chance I wouldn't be the person that I am today, because through history, I learned that, first of all, history tends to repeat itself. And, you know, we learned so much about what is going on in the world and incorporating it to real everyday experiences through things like MUN, Model United Nations. And so that paved my pathway to learning more about current affairs. And I was so fascinated by history that it obviously, you know, shapes current affairs and international relations. And I was just captivated at the way governments and politics and economics works on an international scale. So that fueled my desire to go into the career path that I am currently in.
You mentioned just a little bit ago, you know, the struggles that you had to overcome in losing your dancing partner and then into adapting into a new culture. And overcoming struggles at such a young age can be a powerful lesson. What do you think was the most important takeaway from your 3 years at Beau Soleil?
I think, well, it's really twofold. The first is really resilience. And, you know, Beau Soleil taught me that it's what you do that counts. And failure is only a pathway for success. So, you know, failure really refines you, it sharpens you. And I truly believe that the difference between successful people and people that are not successful is the ability to persevere and to continue. Because the moment that, you know, the day that you choose to give up is the day that you fail. And so Beau Soleil really taught me to pick myself up in any situation that I'm failing supposedly in, and to either pivot or adapt or to, you know, find new ways to make it work. And that principle has you know, be reconfirmed to me throughout my life, even during studying at Stanford University. They really teach you that failure is integral to success, because without failure, you can't learn from your mistakes. And, you know, a lot of the biggest business leaders in the world today, Jeff Bezos is a brilliant example he encourages a culture of trying to fail. And a lot of the different pathways, I think it's the marketplace that actually came into being, was because it had previously the idea of what it was had failed. And they'd learned the principles and the reasons of what went wrong in order to correct them and make them right. And, you know, even in science, we learn about experimenting and we treat something as a hypothesis. And the whole point of that is to test it and to iterate on it and to see whether it gives you the result that you want or not. And so without being able to fail, you can't really know which direction to go into. But apart from that, as I mentioned, it's twofold. That's the first key takeaway that I learned at Beau Soleil. And the second is really this fine balance between a practical and theoretical learning environment. So for me, the ability to actually implement what I'm learning in class, whether it be in history, and then go and do MUN and travel to countries like Beijing, Harvard hosted the annual MUN, or Rome, and being able to implement all these different theories in practice is a huge valuable experience. Being able to travel to India and teach maths and history and geography to kids is just the way you teach, it increases your learning capabilities. And so I think having this balance between a theoretical and practical environment really propels and fuels a student to success. And so I think Basolet really does a fantastic job in fostering where students are talented, and they give them all the resources that they need to be able to grow and continue to develop their talents. So I know that wasn't exactly one key takeaway, but it definitely,
it's excellent. I think you're so spot on, especially when you mentioned learning the ability to pivot at such a young age. I feel like that's such a game changer, especially in times like this. In, COVID, a crisis, having, being able to readapt or reinvent. I know that the terms have been overused by now, but is absolutely true. And it's really dictating who succeeds and who doesn't. And, having that advantage of, being exposed to this environment where you had to learn to adapt to another culture, to a completely new environment. And already having done that in the past, it certainly makes it easier when you have to do it again in the future. So I feel that, it really comes in handy, all these lessons that we learn when studying abroad. So I'm really glad you mentioned them. Now, moving on a little bit to your professional accomplishments, you wrote a book, The Lonely Tiger, at the tender age of 8. In order to donate the proceeds to impoverished children in Zimbabwe so they could receive education. How did that idea come about, and what are your memories from that experience at such a young age?
So, growing up in Zimbabwe, being born in Zimbabwe, being exposed to poverty and social injustice at a very young age, I'm very grateful. I have the most incredible parents. And my mom is a solemn humanitarian. So since I was a very young girl, I was brought up in a privileged home, but my mother always took me with her to, rural communities, to orphanages, to visit charities. And I started to question why I had, won this life lottery. Why was my life so different, especially to the children that we would visit at orphanages? And I would question things like, why do I have 3 meals a day and these kids don't? Why do I have a family and these kids don't? Why do I have access to a loving environment, to clean water, to a roof over my head? And it just really inspired me to make a positive impact in my community. And I recognized at a young age that I was different. And it was almost my responsibility that because I had the opportunity to make a difference, I had to do it. And so I learned to read and write at a very young age. And I always loved storytelling. So I decided to write a book. It's called The Lonely Tiger. And the whole book is about the morals and the values of friendship, forgiveness, being kind. And in my mind at that age, the lonely tiger, I'm an only child. So I think it was me trying to relate to the orphans in some way or another. And they are, very lonely in the sense that they don't have a family. They're entirely alone. And so I wanted to give them this gift to know that in life, you always have a friend. And friendship is like the primary, it's the primary thing in the Lonely Tiger. And so my idea was, okay, I went to my mom and dad and I said, if I write a book, can we give the money to especially Harare Children's Home? This is the orphanage that I really loved and visited. And my dad kind of looked at me and he said, well, if you want to write a book, you're going to have to do it on your own. And I was so determined. I went, wrote out on pieces of paper made a hole through all the pieces, tied it with a string, brought it to my dad. And I obviously didn't know the word published, but I said, and I drew all the pictures and I said, okay, Dad, can we get this book in like the bookstores so we can sell it? And he was really impressed that I actually went and did what I said I wanted to do. So we ended up, all the proceeds that we made from The Lonely Tiger went towards empowering children in Zimbabwe to receive an education. And Nelson Mandela is one of my heroes in life. I think being from Southern Africa, I always remembered the motto. Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. And so for me, education was always a huge part of why I recognized what I had that was different to the kids that we saw. And I wanted to give them the ability to be empowered to receive an education.
Tatiana, I noticed that both of your companies, The Lonely Tiger and Global Impact Network, share a passion for sustainability. The Lonely Tiger creates stories that educate children about the impact of their decisions. And the Global Impact Network is a social network that helps people measure their impact on the environment. Could you tell us more about how Global Impact Network works and what you're hoping to accomplish there?
Sure, definitely. So my journey towards sustainable development did begin at a very young age. So the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 is quality education. And back in 2016, when I was studying at King's College in London, I was studying international relations. I spoke at the United Nations on the Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. So for those that are listening, back in 2015, all the United Nations members, the countries that belong, so 197 countries, agreed upon a global framework to achieve 17 global goals by 2030. And something that really frustrated me studying international relations, I specialized in international law. And that's actually what I wanted to end up doing. I wanted to pursue a master's and a PhD in international law. And this experience at the United Nations, being able to be in an environment with all these stakeholders and trying to apply the theoretical learning in the practical environment, I was extremely frustrated to learn that there is this overarching problem of a lack of accountability, transparency, and collaboration amongst all stakeholders in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So whether that be governments or businesses or schools or individual citizens, it really frustrated me that I would go online and I wouldn't be able to see how progress was being done. And obviously, if we don't know where progress is being made, we don't know where action is required. We don't know where to invest into, work or bring value and to improve. And so the concept of sustainable development really got me hooked, and it inspired me. It made me understand that there is a way for us to improve the world that we live in. And that was where the birth of the idea of global impact came into place. So the biggest problem that we're trying to solve is the ability to capture real-time data. A lot of the data that we have on sustainable development, whether it be on so for the SDGs, there's 17 global goals. 1 is no poverty, 2 is no hunger, 3 is health and well-being, 4 is quality education, 5 is gender equality, 6 is clean water and sanitation, 7 is renewable energy. Then you get to 12, responsible consumption and production, 13, climate change, 14, life below water, 15, life on land. So there's these vast majority of goals. And what global impact is trying to do, because a lot of the governments and businesses are using data from the past, they're using data from 2016, doesn't show us really where we are right now. And on an individual level more so, people feel sort of hopeless and helpless in the ability to change the world. And so what we do is it's a platform. It's like Facebook. It's a social network. But what we do is we capture, so any action that you take, whether you're posting your reusable bottle, you are able to measure your unique contribution in changing the world. You're able to measure your impact in achieving sustainable development. And you're able to see how different governments are performing towards achieving the global goals, how different businesses are, the roles that schools have to play, and as an individual. So if I reuse a bottle, I can see how much plastic I'm saving that I would have got if I had bought a plastic bottle, how much CO2 emissions I'm saving that would have gone into the production of plastic. And so there's a variety of different challenges, but all of our challenges are linked towards the global goals. And so it's really a platform that empowers people to not only know how to make a positive impact, but to measure and showcase that impact and to become a leader within sustainability globally.
Does the platform suggest ideas or provides samples of actions? Like, let's say if you carpool with someone, this is what this is how you're contributing to the environment. Or if you go for a beach cleanup activity, or are there examples that are provided to encourage people to do more?
Yes. So the difference between, if you look at it as a social network and you compare it maybe to Instagram, the difference between Global Impact Network is that your posts are based on challenges that you select. So you select a challenge that you want to participate in, whether it's a beach cleanup or whether it's tutoring or whether it's reusing or recycling or whatever it might be. And then your post is associated to that challenge. So we use technology to verify, and we've built algorithms to quantify and measure your impact. So yeah, the biggest difference is that we issue a global impact score. So each time you take action and you post on that action, not only do you get statistics, impact statistics, like you've saved this amount of CO2 emissions, or this amount of plastic, or this amount of wood paper, or you've increased.
You earn points as well?
Exactly. So each challenge, the harder the challenge, like tutoring somebody, for example, and increasing access to education or proficiency levels in a country, the harder the challenge, the higher your global impact score. And so we have a leaderboard, and you can see who are the top performing citizens that are creating a positive impact in the world. And this leaderboard will expand to not only be for citizens, but to compare companies. So companies will be able to have a global impact score as well. So will schools, so will governments. And then we can that way really see who are our leaders in creating a positive impact globally.
It sounds great because so many of us have that as part of our personal goals, life goals. So I think having the opportunity to be able to look at companies in the future and know, what their score is, and being able to select a company whose goals align with your own. It's
exactly.
Just such a neat concept that, you'd be like, oh, this company scored so high in global impact. They're doing great things for the environment, and they're contributing to the goals that you just mentioned, that, you would.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah, with companies, I mean, there's a lot of greenwashing going on. So, there is this now societal shift where people are becoming a lot more conscious towards sustainability. And sustainability really is it's a triple bottom line. It's profit, people, and planet. It's not, to have a sustainable business model. It's sustainability as a concept is definitely, I mean, you see Greta Thunberg with her Friday for Future movement. You see, the Black Lives Matter protests that recently happened. People are becoming more aware of this shift that is happening. And I think that when it comes to companies, what I love about what Global Impact offers is that you can go and, let's say, in the future, Zara is on there. You can see where Zara is ranked in the fashion industry, and it kind of shifts your ability to make a decision, because a part of the problem is that people don't know which companies are actually good for people and the planet. And so being able to go onto Zara's profile page and seeing exactly transparently what they're doing to be a sustainable company kind of shifts your ability to make better decisions. Like, why would I support shopping at this whichever shop it is, versus Patagonia, where I know exactly the programs that they've put in place. I can see the community, the members that are a part of their company, that are actually witnessing and showcasing their efforts towards sustainability.
Sure, and the concept is incredibly relevant. What is the hardest part about getting companies on board?
I think the hardest part is that a lot of companies are still set back in time. They're still living in the past. And so this mentality of only being profit driven is probably one of the biggest difficulties. But again, as I mentioned, we are witnessing this shift where it's now no longer just an obligation to stakeholders or to shareholders, sorry. It's an obligation to all stakeholders. And so I really do believe that in the future, the most successful companies are going to be the ones that implement a triple bottom line, taking people and planet into consideration alongside profit. And so I think it's these companies that are stuck in the past, that are only profit driven. They're kind of the ones that's difficult to cross the line. But I think COVID has presented this opportunity where we have shifted to a more digital age, and it's also exposed a lot of structural flaws in our societies. And so it's become more of an opportunity for companies to apply a triple bottom line.
No, I honestly really like the concept, and it sounds like you're about to have such an exciting journey ahead and so many great things to come. And up until this point, what would you say that is your proudest accomplishment?
Wow, that's a tough question.
That's a big one.
I mean, I could say, the fact that I'm the youngest author in history in Zimbabwe, or that I've spoken at the United Nations at a young age, or which was a huge dream of mine since I was a little girl.
How old were you when you spoke at the United Nations?
I was 19 or 20.
Wow.
I think I just turned 20 years old. Yeah. And so, standing in front of a massive audience is quite intimidating, but that was a huge dream of mine. I could also say Stanford University, that was a massive dream of mine, but I would say my biggest accomplishment definitely has been global impact, because I really believe in its power to change the world. And I think that for me, my biggest accomplishment personally is being able to empower people to know just how powerful they are and the difference that they can make. And so to date, that has definitely been my greatest accomplishment is creating this company.
I love it. Well, if all goes according to your dreams, where will you end up?
Honestly, only God knows that. I'm definitely very goal-oriented, especially in the long to medium term. And I follow a rule of objectives and key results. But in the long term, talking about being able to pivot and adapt, I don't really have a set mind frame of where I see myself. I'm more prepared for whatever that comes. All I know is that I want to be happy. I want to be doing something that I love. I want to wake up every morning enthusiastic and motivated to do something meaningful in my life, and to have a loving family, to be healthy. I guess that's my dream for the future. So wherever it decides to go, I will be content as long as I know that I'm leading and living a purpose-driven life.
Tatiana, you're certainly wise beyond your years. I truly, truly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today. Good luck with everything. Thank you once again for participating, and I truly, truly wish you the best.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful, and I love what you're doing. I think being able to inspire people from all over the globe is such a wonderful mission. So it's really, I'm very humbled. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. If anyone wishes to continue this conversation, can they find you on LinkedIn?
Yes, definitely. And I urge you to please go and check out globalimpact.world and join the movement. check it out, measure your impact. But yeah, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Thank you. And if any of our listeners have questions about anything else they heard on the podcast today, feel free to email me at carla@swisslearning.com. Thank you. And until next time.